Today I'm talking about the Catholic Church and its attitude to women with Claudia Lücking-Michel, Vice President of the Central Committee of German Catholics. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're watching the DW interview. I'm Thomas Spahn. Welcome to the show. Mrs. Lücking-Michel, the Church has always been part of your life. When you think back to your childhood, what were your first formative experiences with regard to faith and the Church?
I grew up in a Catholic family, and it not only seemed normal to be Catholic, my parents and the whole family were involved in the Church. Formative experiences? Well, we've just had the feast of Corpus Christi, and one of my early memories is being a flower girl in the Corpus Christi procession. That reminds me of some decisive changes. As a flower girl, I dreamed of taking my first communion and being able to head the procession with the bigger children. By the time I was that age, our village no longer had a Corpus Christi procession. Those kinds of changes, but life goes on, and if some things are being centralized and transferred to the big cathedrals, it's important to ensure the local church remains alive. And so I got involved in youth work.
Back when you were a flower girl, when was the first time you realized that it's men who have all the say in the Catholic Church and women hardly at all?
Oh, I was a late starter. I don't think it was an issue for me at all in my childhood or in my youth when I became active in the Church. Even when I started studying theology, when I encountered other students who were really into feminist theology and exegesis, I didn't take them seriously. It took a long time until I understood that the status of women in our church is so different that it is worth talking about. It was only when I started thinking about my career choice and my career profile I realized that I wasn't prepared to go along with that status quo and just be a lay pastor and always subject to the local priest, and as a woman never have the chance of progressing any further. That made me stop and think.
That sounds like a rebellious spirit. Now you've progressed among lay Catholics. You're the Vice President of the Central Committee of German Catholics. Do you feel like you're just the quota woman there?
I wouldn't mind if I was. I'm in favor of quotas. The main thing is to have women there. But we have a lot of good women in the full assembly of the organizations we represent. And so the point was to elect women onto the Central Committee who represent a certain area. Not just fulfill a quota, but to ensure that all groups in the assembly are represented.
How do modern women see the Catholic Church today, being a male-dominated institution? What about your daughter, for example?
For her, it's incomprehensible and unacceptable that there are institutions that don't take women seriously, in the way that is now taken for granted, on paper at least, everywhere else in our society. Of course, in politics, in business and in other areas, there's still a lot to do to achieve equality and equal participation, but no one would dare to say today that women, on principle, have no business being there.
Remarkably, Pope Francis has now indicated a willingness to consider ordaining women as deacons in the Church. What was your first thought when you heard that?
I was surprised. I was completely surprised. There have been countless studies, books, activities, diaconate network resolutions, and still nothing happened in Rome. And I wasn't aware of anything that might put the issue back on the table. So I was very, very happy when I heard what happened, that these nuns put the question to the Pope and didn't give up. And when the Pope then said, yes, we should set up a commission to study the issue, they were so clever to immediately publicize his words so that even we here in Germany got to hear about it.
We should perhaps explain deacon as a Greek word meaning servant or helper.
Deacons were responsible for ministering to others. The Lutheran Church's social welfare organization here in Germany is called the Diakonie, which comes from the same word. It had to do with the idea that if we can't tend to people's needs, then we are not the Church of Christ. But deacons have always been involved in the liturgy too, and in leadership responsibilities. And in this conflict, which was not an issue in historical times, we need to look and see what role women can take on, and to remember that for centuries ordained women deacons were quite normal.
There's a growing shortage of priests in Germany and in Europe. Not many young people want to become priests. So isn't it urgently necessary to bring more women into positions of responsibility?
Well, no one wants to be a stopgap solution, of course, where if there's no one else, take a woman. But yes, de facto, the way things are going, it could force a decision like that. Saying we have a shortage of priests in Germany is an understatement. One man responsible for training priests in Münster said recently their intake was approaching zero. So the church authorities will have to start thinking about how to incorporate women. But it's about more than that. The Church simply cannot allow all this talent, charisma and callings to be lost if it really wants to preach the good news of Christ in a convincing way.
So you oppose the Church's structural exclusion of women, as you once described it, but what about excluding the right-wing party, the Alternative for Germany? The AfD has not been invited to the German Catholic Congress that's currently underway. Do you agree with that decision?
I was involved in the discussions at the time. It was a long time ago, before the AfD was in the public eye like it is now. But one thing that hasn't changed is the fact that we invite people to the Congress who we hope can make valuable contributions as experts to develop the issues that are being discussed. It's not about having everyone represented. There are other parties and groups that weren't invited to the Congress either, even church groups that wanted to be there. We invite people who can make useful contributions to the discussion. And with the AfD, we were all of the opinion, yes, we do need to deal with the issues that the party represents, and we need to look at what people in our country are concerned about. But we didn't want the AfD there, as we didn't expect them to provide any helpful answers.
But won't that strengthen them?
Now, where it's become such a big issue, we need to consider whether it was actually so smart. If we had incorporated them, maybe the whole thing would have been perceived differently, or wouldn't have drawn so much attention. It's not a decision for all eternity, but still, in this situation, it was good not to invite them here.
Ecce Homo is the motto of this year's German Catholic Congress. Behold the man. It's a reference to the refugee situation in Germany. And it's the Church's welcome to refugees that has caused many in the AfD and many of its voters to accuse the Church of giving the impression that anyone who wants can come to Germany. Has the Church been too unclear at times?
It's always important to communicate one's position more clearly. But leaving aside the important debate over the right to asylum and its legal aspects, and that it's not just about telling everyone to come to Germany, the main message, which came through repeatedly in the opening ceremony, which I'm very happy about, is that those who've been forced to flee or have been driven from their homelands, who look to us for help, should be welcome.
And the others who want a better life in Germany?
I think everyone can understand that. If I saw the chance of a better life for me and my family, I would also think, should we go there? There's nothing wrong in that. But it's clear that such people don't qualify for the right to asylum and refugee status. We need to open other channels for them, and that's something we've neglected to do. And as a politician myself, and as a member of the Conservatives, I have to admit that we are partly to blame. We've neglected to draw up a proper immigration law. If we had, we could say, no, you don't qualify as an asylum seeker, but as an immigrant, you're welcome. You need to meet these requirements and conditions, and then you can come. And that would be a viable alternative for some of the people who are now coming here as refugees. And that would be better for them and, in the long term, for our country too.
Mrs. Lücking-Michel, we always end our interview with 3 unfinished sentences that I would ask you to complete. I'm a member of the Bonn Carnival Committee because...
Because it's fun. It's great to celebrate Carnival together and to be involved.
Heaven on earth for me is...
enjoying a good meal with my family in peace, or reading a good book in a deck chair or on the sofa with peace and quiet.
Pope Joan has so far only been a novel and a film. I would be in favor of...
examining ways for women, not necessarily to become Pope right away, but reviewing this fundamental exclusion of women from the ordained ministry and then taking the first steps to change that.
I wish you success.
Yes, thank you.